Chapter 1. Once upon a time, a queen sat at a window sewing. Outside the window, the snow was falling like feathers from the sky. The frame of the window was made of black wood. While she was sewing and looked out of the window, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell on the white cloth. The red blood looked pretty on the white cloth. She thought to herself, I want to have a child as white as snow, with lips as red as blood, and hair as black as the window of the window frame. Soon after that, she had a daughter who was as white as snow. Her lips were as red as blood, and her hair was as black as the wood of the window frame. She was called Little Snow White. However, when the child was born, the queen died. Chapter 2. After a year had passed, the king took another wife for himself. She was a beautiful woman, but proud and arrogant. She could not bear anyone who was more beautiful than her. She had a fantastic magic mirror. It told the truth. When she stood in front of it and said, magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest woman in the world? The magic mirror answered, my queen, you are the fairest woman in the world. Then she was satisfied, because the mirror only told the truth. But Snow White grew up and became more and more beautiful. When Snow White was 17 years old, she was more beautiful than the queen. One morning, the queen asked the mirror, magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest woman in the world? It answered, oh, Lady Queen, Snow White is fairer than you. Then the queen was shocked, and she turned yellow and green. Whenever she looked at Snow White, she sighed deeply. The queen hated the girl so much. Her envy and pride grew higher and higher. She had no peace day or night. She called a hunter and said, take the child away into the forest. I don't want to see her anymore. Kill her and bring her back her heart. The hunter obeyed and took her away. But as he drew his knife and tried to kill Snow White, she began to weep and said, ah, dear hunter, let me have my life. I will run away into the forest and never come home again. The hunter felt sorry for her and said, run away, poor child. But he thought, the wild beasts will eat her soon. He felt peace since he did not need to kill her. A little bear came running up to him, and he killed it with a knife. He cut out its heart and took it to the queen. Chapter 3. Now the poor child was all alone in the dark forest. She looked at all the leaves on the trees, and she did not know what to do. Then she began to run again, and she ran until it was almost evening. Night came, and Snow White began to cry loudly. She felt terrible eyes spying on her, and she heard strange sounds that made her heart pound. At last, overcome by tiredness, she fell asleep under a tree. Finally, Dawn came, and the song of the birds came to the forest. Snow White woke up too. The dark forest was full of life, and now she realized she did not need to be afraid. However, the thick trees were like a wall around her, and as she tried to find a way out, she came upon a path. She walked along it. She walked until she came to a clearing. There was a strange cottage with a tiny door and tiny windows. Everything about the cottage was much smaller than normal. Snow White pushed the small door open. Everything in the cottage was small, but cleaner than can be told. There was a white cloth on the table, 7 little plates, 7 little spoons, 7 little knives, 7 little forks, and 7 little cups were on the table. There were 7 little beds side by side. They were covered with blankets that were white like snow. Chapter 4. Snow White was so hungry and thirsty. She ate some vegetables and bread from each plate and drank juice from each cup. She did not want to eat and drink everything from one plate or cup. Then, because she was so tired, she laid herself down on one of the little beds. None of them were the right size for her. One bed was too long and another bed was too short. At last, Snow White found that the 7th bed was just right. She rested on that bed. She said a prayer and went to sleep. When it was quite dark, the owners of the cottage came back. They were 7 dwarfs who dug deep in the mountains for metal. They had 7 candles. They saw that someone had been there, because everything was not in the same place where they left it. The first dwarf said, "Who has been sitting on my chair?" The second dwarf said, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third dwarf said, "Who has been eating some of my bread?" The fourth dwarf said, "Who has been eating my vegetables?" The fifth dwarf said, "Who has been using my fork?" The sixth dwarf said, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The 7th dwarf said, "Who has been drinking out of my cup?" Then the first dwarf looked around and saw that there was something different about his bed. Someone was sleeping in my bed. The other dwarfs came over and each of them said, "Someone was lying in my bed too." But then the 7th dwarf looked at his bed. He saw Snow White sleeping on it. He called the others, and they cried out with surprise. They brought their 7 little candles with them. Oh my goodness, what a lovely young lady! They were so glad they did not wake her up. They let her sleep in the bed. The 7th dwarf rested with his friends. The next morning, the dwarfs asked the little girl, "Who are you?" Snow White told them her sad story. They cried many tears. Then one of the dwarfs blew his nose. "Stay here with us," he said. "Hooray! Hooray!" They cheered and danced joyfully around the little girl. The dwarfs said to Snow White, "You can live here and take care of the house while we work. Don't worry about the queen. We love you and we will take care of you." Snow White was grateful. She accepted their favor. The next morning, the dwarfs left for work. They told Snow White not to open the door for people she did not know. Chapter 5. Meanwhile, the hunter had returned to the castle. He gave the heart of the little bear to the queen. He told her it belonged to Snow White. He wanted to claim the reward. The queen was very pleased. She turned again to the magic mirror. But the mirror said, "The loveliest woman in the land is still Snow White, who lives with the 7 dwarfs." The queen was extremely angry. She lost her mind. "She must die. She must die," she screamed. The woman disguised herself as an old peasant woman. She put a poisoned apple in her basket. Then she went quickly into the forest and she crossed the swamp. She came to the edge of the swamp. At the same time, Snow White waved goodbye to the 7 dwarfs. Snow White was in the kitchen when she heard the sound at the door. "Knock, knock." "Who's there?" she said. She remembered the dwarf's advice. "I'm an old peasant woman selling apples," the voice replied. "I don't need any apples, thank you," Snow White replied. "But they are beautiful apples, and they are so juicy," said the smooth voice from outside the door. "I should not open the door for anyone," said Snow White. She did not want to ignore what the dwarfs had said. "You are right, good girl. You can't buy anything if you promised not to open the door for strangers. You are a good girl." Then the old woman continued, "As a reward for being good, I'm going to give you an apple as a gift." Right away, Snow White opened the door, just a tiny bit, to take the apple. "There, that's a nice apple, isn't it?" Snow White bit into the fruit. She fainted and fell to the ground. The poison killed her quickly. The evil queen hurried away. She ran back across the swamp. She tripped and fell into some quicksand. No one heard her call for help. She disappeared. No one could find her. Chapter 6. Meanwhile, the dwarfs came out of the mine. They saw that the sky was dark and stormy. Thunder made loud sounds in the valleys and lightning ripped through the sky. They were worried about Snow White. They quickly ran to the cottage. At the cottage, they found Snow White. She was lying there, dead. The poisoned apple was by her side. They tried their best to wake her up, but nothing worked. They wept and wept for a long time. Then they laid her on a bed of rose petals. They carried her into the forest and put her in a glass box. They laid a flower there each day. One evening, they found a young man. He looked at Snow White's pretty face through the glass. The man was a prince. He heard Snow White's story, and he had an idea. If you allow me to take her to my castle, I will bring in doctors. They will wake her up from this strange sleep. The prince saw her again, and he said, "She's so lovely. I wish I could kiss her." He did. It was magic. The prince's kiss broke the spell. Everyone was surprised. Snow White opened her eyes. She came back to life. The prince was in love. He asked Snow White to marry him. The dwarves were sad. They said goodbye to Snow White. Snow White lived in the great castle. She was very happy. But she remembered the little cottage. Sometimes she went to the forest to visit her friends.